Hello guys, welcome again to my YouTube channel. I hope you all are doing awesome. So this video is going to be very interesting where I will try to explain end-to-end application deployment in Docker container. Sorry in advance if this video is going to be a bit longer because I will try to cover basics of each tools involved in this demo so that even if you are new to DevOps, you can easily understand. Also do let me know in the comment section if you want me to make detailed video on any of the technology explained in this video. Before we get started, I will share the tech stack which I will be using in this video. First of all, we will be using Python to create a web application, and this is very easy. Generally, this is responsibility of developer to develop the code, but for this video, we will create our own for the demo purpose, and trust me, it is very easy. Second is Docker, where we are going to deploy our application as containers. Even if you are new to Docker, I will try to cover the basics of Docker. That includes what is Docker, what are containers, what is Docker file, and the different Docker commands. Third is database. For our purpose, we will deploy a MySQL database that will store the user information entered from the Python web application. Again, to create database and table in MySQL, we will be using MySQL Workbench. I will show how to install MySQL Workbench in this video, so get along with me. Now talking about the entire flow, what we are going to do in this video is to deploy both Python web app and MySQL as a Docker container in our local host or our local machine. In Python web app, user will enter the name and mail address, and that is finally going to be stored in the MySQL database running as another container. To view table data, we will be using MySQL Workbench. Without any further delay, let's quickly get started and understand the entire flow one by one. We will first aim on how to create our first Python web application, as it is a developer responsibility to build the application. So you as a DevOps engineer not required to worry much on this part, but still I will go through the code so that it will be easy for you to relate further. So this is the Python web app code that I will be using today. I will share the GitHub link for same in description. So to create web app using Python, we will be using Flask module. It is a web framework that provides libraries to build lightweight web applications using Python. Also, I will import MySQL module as our app will store data in MySQL database and OS module to interact with the operating system, like to create a new file in system or to access the environment variable set in the system. So finally, we have imported three modules in our code, that is Flask module, MySQL module, OS module. Flask module is used to create a web application in Python. MySQL is to create database connectivity with the Flask web application. OS module to do any system related task. Next is this line. This line, actually the variable underscore name what we are passing, it is the first argument when creating an instance of the Flask object. In this case, this represents the name of the application. So our Python web application name would be app. So we are assigning the name to our application using this line. Okay. Now in these line, actually, we are providing the configuration for our app application. It includes the MySQL connectivity detail. First is MySQL host. This is basically the name of container where our MySQL is running. And since they both app and MySQL container will be deployed in the same network, they can connect with each other with just name. No need to mention IP or port detail for connection. I will show in the later part of this video how we are going to deploy both the containers in same network inside the Docker. Second is MySQL username and password to connect app with the MySQL instance. Third is database name. Database we will create from the MySQL Workbench with the name MySQLDB. Okay. All these variable values we are getting from the OS environment variable. That means in our case, we will get it from the container environment variable, and that we will be setting while building the Docker image for our Python web application. I will show this also in the later part of the video. Now the next line means web app has to open the MySQL connectivity. This line indicates that particular scenario. Okay. Now we are doing app routing, means mapping the URL to a specific function that will handle the logic for that particular URL. So basically we have three type of method, that is get, post and delete. Post means that you add an element, like in this example I will add name and mail ID. Get means that you retrieve the elements, and delete means to delete that particular element. In my sample application, I have just put definition of the post method. That is, once we enter the name or email address, it should get stored in the MySQL DB. Means if our request is post method, then whatever we are entering, that is in our case mail ID or username, that is finally going to be stored in the MySQL database. Okay. So basically now once we have entered the username and mail ID from the web, the code will take those info and will run the MySQL query that is going to insert that particular element onto our database table. So if you are aware of the database query, then you might be aware of this particular MySQL query, that is insert into users. Means insert these particular name and email into the users table of our database. This I will be creating using the MySQL workbench while I will be going through the demo part of this particular video. Okay. Now this line indicate that is finally we are saving these particular elements onto our table. And the last is this render template. What this render template actually does, it is used to generate output from a template file based on the Jinja 2 engine that is found in the application template folder. This is a template folder inside which we have the index.html file. It will by default take that location and it will create the template based out of these files. Okay. So basically it is a simple HTML file under the template folder of Flask app where we are defining the template for our app. Like for username, the input type is text, and then for email, the input type is email. Let's get back to the code again. And finally, we are running the server on this URL, that is host is 0.0.0. So that means server is publicly accessible. This is the overall code walkthrough of a very simple web application developed using Python Flask module. Now comes the next part, that where we are going to deploy our app. So for this, I have decided to deploy it as a container using Docker. If you are new to Docker, no need to worry, as here I will explain the basics of Docker too. So basically, let's say you created an application and that is working fine in your machine. But in production, it didn't work as expected, and the reason could be anything like missing libraries, missing dependencies, or any module or any OS level features. So to overcome this issue, Docker comes into picture. In short, it is a standardized way to package the application with its dependencies and deploy it in an environment. It makes easy to develop, deploy, and manage applications. Now comes what is container. Docker basically packages an application and all its dependencies in a virtual container that can run on any Linux server. Each container runs as an isolated process and take very less space. In order to deploy any application as a container, we need to create a Docker file. It is basically a set of instructions or commands to assemble an image with all its dependencies. Let's take a look for our Python web application, how we are going to create a Docker file and deploy this application. So this is a simple Docker file what I have created for the Python web application. A Docker file must begin with a from instruction. The from instruction specifies the parent image from which you are building the app. These are like publicly accessible image in Docker Hub, which by default Docker will pull from the Docker Hub and no authentication will be required. For example, in my case, I am pulling an image that is already having Python and Flask module installed on it, and that I need not to do anything on my level. Okay. So let me show you from where this image is actually coming. So basically from the Docker Hub, that is public Docker Hub, it will take this particular image and it is already having the Flask module installed in this particular image. Okay. Next is the env argument. Env means setting the environment variable for our container. Like for our case, I am setting these environment variable on the container level, that is MySQL username, MySQL password, and MySQL DB. So you remember these things only I am using in my code from the environment variable using the OS module in Python. Okay, whatever we are setting it here, it will be read by these particular configuration in our Python web application code. Okay. Next is run. Run is basically to run a Linux commands inside the container. That is, I am creating an app folder inside the home directory of the container. Once you log in into the container, you will get that home folder already exists. Inside that particular home folder, I am creating an app folder. Okay. Next is copy command. Copy means copy the content from the current working directory to the home app folder of the container. Okay. Dot means current working directory inside my local machine. From that, I am copying whatever is there, means this index.html file, app.py, everything I am copying into the home app folder. Okay. And finally, the CMD argument. CMD is the command that container executes by default when you launch the build image. So basically, once the container start, it will execute Python home app.py. This particular command will be executed. Means this app.py will be running inside the container. Okay. So once the container start, it will run this particular command and our Python web application will be up and running inside the container. Okay. Till this point, now we are clear what is Docker, what are containers, what are images, and what is the Docker file. Now comes the next part, that is how to install Docker. Okay. So depending on your OS, you can follow this particular official document on how to install Docker based on the different type of OS. If you are on the Ubuntu machine, then you can follow this particular doc. You need to just run these commands one by one and your Docker service should be up and running. Now, once you have Docker installed onto your system, you need to build an image based on out of this Docker file. So this is the Docker file which I have created for my Python web application code. I need to build image out of it. Now how to build image in Docker? Let's see. Now you have these many files inside this particular folder. I need to build the image based out of this file. So what is the command to build the image? Docker build to build the image. Then -t is used for tag the image. I am tagging the image with name my app and this is the version I am using 1.0. Next is dot, that means it will take the Docker file from the current working directory. It will by default take this Docker file. With this naming convention, it will take this particular Docker file and build the image out of it. Just hit enter. So now the image is built. I had already pulled this image from the Docker hub, so it was very quick for me. Might be for you, it may take more time. Now to view all the images onto your system, you need to run docker images command. Okay. It will show all the image whatever exists in my system. Just now I have created this image. This is my app. My app is the name. Then 1.0 is the version. So this is the particular image that has been created for my Python web application. Once the image is built, we need to run the app inside the container. As we have two containers, we want them to establish connection between them using just the name. So we are creating a common network inside the Docker for them and deploy both the containers in the same network. So how to create a new network inside the Docker? For that, we have the command docker create network test. It will just create a new network that is test. Okay, so basically it throws this error because I already had the test network created in my machine. So I need not to create this network again. I will just use the existing one. You can create the network using this command, docker create network test. Okay, and we'll deploy both the containers inside the same network that is test. Now we will see how to run that particular Python web application inside the container. For that, we have the command docker run, and then we need to specify the network name, that is hyphen network, then the network name, that is test. Then we are mapping the port. Actually, what it does, it creates a map. Map in the sense our application will be accessible inside this port onto this port 5001 on our local machine. Means inside the container it will run at the 5000 port, but if we want to access this particular web application from our local machine, it will expose 5001 port onto our local machine. Okay. Now next is the image name. So our image is my app 1.0. Let's hit enter and copy this one. But we have exposed this particular web application on 5001 port of our local machine. So we will try on 5001 port. You have finally your web server up and running, and you can see that name, email, submit, everything what we have defined in the index.html file, that is coming. But for now, our MySQL container is not up and running. We need to make that up, and then Whatever we enter here, it will be stored in the MySQL database. So till this point, our Python web application is running inside the Docker container. Now comes the deployment of MySQL database in other container. So let's take a look. So for MySQL, we don't need to create our own image. It is just we are using the publicly accessible image for the MySQL. From where we will take that one? We will take it from the official Docker Hub site. Docker Hub. And these are the official repo for the MySQL image. Now to deploy this MySQL image in form of container, we will use the concept of the Docker Compose. What is actually the Docker Compose? Docker Compose is a tool that was developed to help define and share multiple container applications. But in our case, we are just deploying one container using the Docker Compose, that is the MySQL container. Okay. So under services, we have defined the image name, that is the MySQL image we are using. Then we have defined the port. Again, the same concept, 3306, it will be accessible onto the local machine, and on the same port it will be running on inside the container also. Then we are setting few of the environment variables here. As of now, I have just set this MySQL root password, that is my secret pw, and then we have defined the network, that is again I am using the same network, that is test, because we want to deploy both the containers in the same network, that is the test network. And now to run the MySQL container, we need to run the below command, that is docker compose. Whenever you will install the Docker, it will give you these commands also. You need not to install these things explicitly. It will by default come with the Docker installation. Then specify the Docker compose file, that is docker.yaml. And then write up. Means everything defined inside the services, will all those containers will be up and running. It is now pulling this MySQL image. Okay. So here MySQL container is up and running, and inside the Docker container at the same port, that is 3306, it is running, and on the local host also it is running on the same port, because we have mapped the same port on the local host also and also inside the container. Okay, containers are being ran. Also now you can see here what all containers are running on this particular machine using the command docker ps. So we have two containers running now, that is the Python web application and the MySQL container. So to connect with the MySQL instance and view it in our UI, we will be using MySQL Workbench. I have already installed it, but in your case, if you want to install it, then you can follow this particular document. You just need to open this one, you can log in, and or just you can start the download. It will install the MySQL Workbench in your system. This looks like this one. Okay. Now we just need to open the MySQL Workbench and add our connections there. Okay, that is the MySQL connection we need to add over the MySQL Workbench. Click on the plus sign, just give the name test. And again, it is the local host. Then again, it is running on the same port, that is 3306, and with username, that is root. Also, we have defined the root password inside our Docker file, that is this particular password. You just need to copy this password and you can test the connection also. Click test connection. It is already saved, so it is able to make the connection. If you are doing for the first time, it will ask for the password. You can enter the same password and it will be done. Then click on OK. It is showing that the connection is already established. You need to choose a different name. Let's try to give test1 and again click OK. So connection is made. Open this one and you have these particular. So this is like a UI from where we can create the database, update the database, or create any table. All those kind of queries are very easy to run from here. Let's copy the query what we need to run. All those things I will share in my GitHub repo or also in the link in the description. Everything I will share. So you just need to copy paste and work with it. So these are few of the queries that I will run. All the things inside my code, I am working on the Flask app database. So first thing is I need to create this database. Select this particular line, run this one. Okay. Now we will see the database. Show databases is used to show all the database in your system. run this query, you can see these many databases are there. These are the by default database. Flask app is the one which I have just created now. Now the next query, I am telling that use this particular database for performing any of the operation. That is click here. Okay. Now what we are doing in the next column, we are creating the table that is users table with the field, with the column that is name and email, what we are going to enter in the Python web application, and that is going to stored in this particular table. Again, run it. Now see what all contents exist in the users database, users table. That is for now, I don't have anything, so it should be empty. It is again asking for the password. As I have already mentioned, you can enter the same password, that is my secret. Let me copy from there. Okay. And now I don't have any content over here. That is both name and email is blank as of now. Okay. Now the next line, it is not mandatory to run every time. Maybe you will not face issue because of this particular thing. But to be on the better side, I will just run this command. I think it is required for the MySQL lower version. So I will just run it. Everything is successful. Again, run this select star user and it should be fine. Okay. Now what we are going to do is, really it's the time to run our Python web application and enter the user details and check whether those details came to our table or not. Okay. We will refresh this particular session again. Everything is up and running. Write some name, maybe test, and here give email. It will check those details also, like if you have entered @ in your email or not. So I will better write @ email something. Okay. Click on submit. And finally, its success means all those data are being stored in the MySQL instance. Now again, run the select star users. You will see those details came here. See, test @gmail.com. Those things came over here. Okay. I hope going through this entire video, you are now able to get the real-time DevOps project or how the flow looks like. Do let me know in the comment section if you need detailed video on any of the topic involved here. Thank you for watching the video.